Emmett Holloway dropped to his knees in the snow and pressed his ear against the woman's chest. Her heartbeat was faint, barely there, like a whisper begging not to be forgotten. 7 children stood behind her silent as ghosts, their eyes hollow with hunger. The smallest one, a baby wrapped in rags, wasn't crying anymore. That scared him most. He hadn't spoken to God in 2 years. But kneeling there in that frozen field, he started praying again. If you want to see how this story ends, subscribe to my channel and follow along until the very last word. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The baby stopped crying 3 miles back. Clara Whitmore pressed her hand against the bundle at her chest and felt the faint rise and fall of breath. Still alive. Thank God, still alive. But for how long she didn't know. Her arms had gone numb an hour ago. Her right ankle screamed with every step swollen and twisted from the fall she'd taken near the creek bed. The blood on her temple had frozen into a dark crust. "Mama." Tommy's voice cracked behind her. "Maggie can't walk no more." Clara turned. Her eldest son stood with his 6-year-old sister slumped against his side, her small boots dragging through the snow. Behind them, the others followed in a ragged line. Lizzie held Will's hand, pulling him forward. Sam carried Rose on his back, though his own legs were shaking. 7 children. 7 reasons to keep moving. "Pick her up," Clara said. "I can't, Mama. I ain't strong enough." "You are." Clara limped back toward him, her ankle buckling. She caught herself on Tommy's shoulder. "You're the strongest boy I ever knew. Your daddy said so." Tommy's jaw tightened at the mention of his father, but he bent down and lifted Maggie into his arms. The girl whimpered once, then went quiet. "How much further?" Lizzie asked. She was 10 years old and already had the eyes of someone much older. Clara looked at the horizon. Nothing but white. White sky, white ground, white death waiting patient and cold. "Not far," she lied. They walked. The wind cut through Clara's shawl like it wasn't there. She'd given her coat to Sam 2 days ago when his started falling apart at the seams. Her boots had holes in them now, and she could feel the ice forming between her toes. Every breath hurt. Every step felt like her last. But she kept moving. Because that's what mothers do. Emmett Holloway hadn't left his ranch in 3 weeks. He stood at the window of his cabin watching the snow fall in thick sheets across the valley. His coffee had gone cold in his hand. He hadn't noticed. He hadn't noticed much of anything since Rebecca and Hannah died. 2 years now. 2 years since the fever took them both in the same week. 2 years since he'd buried his wife and daughter side by side under the old cottonwood tree. 2 years since he'd stopped believing that God was listening. The ranch was quiet now. Too quiet. He'd sold most of the horses last spring, kept only enough to survive. The cattle were gone. The hired hands were gone. Even the neighbors had stopped coming around, tired of his silence and his grief. Emmett preferred it that way. He turned from the window and set his cup on the table. The fire was dying. He should add more wood. He should check on the horses. He should do a lot of things. Instead, he sat in the chair by the hearth and stared at the photograph on the wall. Rebecca's crooked smile, Hannah's bright eyes, the life he used to have, the life he'd lost. The scream came from somewhere outside. Emmett was on his feet before he knew he'd moved. He grabbed his rifle from the rack by the door and stepped onto the porch, squinting against the white glare of the snow. Nothing. He waited, listening. The wind howled, the snow fell. Silence. Then he heard it again. Not a scream this time, but a cry, high and thin like a wounded animal, or a child. Emmett pulled on his coat and started walking toward the sound. His boots sank deep into the drifts, each step harder than the last. The cold bit at his face, his hands, his lungs, but he kept moving. Because that cry didn't stop. He crested the hill above his north pasture and stopped dead. There, huddled against the broken fence line, was a woman. She was on her knees in the snow, clutching something to her chest. Around her, like scattered leaves, were children, small, still barely moving. Emmett ran. He reached the woman first. She looked up at him with eyes that had already given up hope. Her face was gray, her lips blue, her dark hair frozen to her cheeks. "Please," she whispered. "My children." Emmett looked at the small bodies around her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the bundle in her arms made 7. 7 children, none of them moving. "Are they alive?" he asked. "I don't know." Her voice broke. "I don't know anymore." He knelt beside the closest child, a boy of maybe 12 with hair the color of wheat. Emmett pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse. Weak, but there. "This one's alive." He moved to the next. A girl, maybe 10. Alive. The next. A boy 8 or 9. Alive. One by one he checked them all. All alive. Barely but alive. "Can you walk?" he asked the woman. She tried to stand. Her legs buckled, and she fell forward into his arms, the baby pressed between them. "I can't," she said. "I'm sorry, I can't." Emmett looked at her ankle swollen to twice its normal size beneath her torn stocking. He looked at the blood on her face, the bruises on her arms. He looked at the 7 children who were depending on her to keep them alive. And he made a decision. "Then I'll carry you." It took 3 trips. Emmett carried the woman and the baby first, half dragging her through the snow toward his cabin. She kept apologizing, kept saying she was sorry, kept asking about her children. He didn't answer. He just kept moving. He set her on the floor by the fire and wrapped every blanket he had around her and the baby. Then he went back for the others. The oldest boy, Tommy, had managed to get to his feet. He was carrying one of the smaller girls in his arms, his face set in grim determination. "I got her," he said. Emmett nodded. "Follow me." Together they brought the children inside. The girl called Lizzie helped her brother Sam walk. The little boy called Will had to be carried. He didn't speak, didn't make a sound, just stared at Emmett with wide, empty eyes. The last one was a toddler, a girl with red cheeks and frost in her hair. She whimpered when Emmett picked her up, then buried her face against his chest. He hadn't held a child since Hannah died. The memory hit him so hard he nearly stumbled. But he kept walking. He brought the girl inside and set her down beside her mother. 7 children. 1 injured woman. 1 cabin that had been built for 2. Emmett looked around at the bodies scattered across his floor, at the blood and the snow, and the desperate hope in the woman's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. "What's your name?" "Clara." She swallowed hard. "Clara Whitmore." "I'm Emmett Holloway." He knelt beside the fire and began stoking the flames. "You're safe now, Mrs. Whitmore. Ain't nobody gonna hurt you here." She started to cry. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Because they hadn't. Emmett set out everything he had. Bread, cheese, dried meat, the last of the beans from the pot on the stove. It wasn't much, but the children fell on it like wolves. Even the baby little Daniel sucked greedily at a rag soaked in warm milk. Clara watched them eat from her place by the fire. Her ankle was propped up on a folded blanket, her face pale with pain. But she didn't complain. She just watched her children, counting them over and over, like she was afraid they might disappear. "When did you last eat?" Emmett asked quietly. 3 days ago, maybe 4. She shook her head. "I gave my portion to the children." All of it. They needed it more. Emmett stared at her. 3 days without food, walking through a blizzard with 7 children and a twisted ankle. Most men he knew wouldn't have lasted 1. "You should eat," he said. "The children first." They're eating now. It's your turn. She hesitated, then reached for a piece of bread. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Emmett watched her take a small bite, then another, until the bread was gone. "Thank you," she said again. He nodded. "There's more if you want it." "I don't want to take too much. You've already given us so much." "Mrs. Whitmore." Emmett's voice was firm but gentle. "I got plenty. Eat." She ate. That night the cabin was full of sounds Emmett hadn't heard in 2 years. Children breathing. Children shifting in their sleep. The soft murmur of a mother singing a lullaby. He sat in his chair by the fire watching Clara rock the baby in her arms. The other children were asleep in a pile on the floor, wrapped in every blanket and quilt he owned. They looked like a litter of puppies, all tangled limbs and peaceful faces. "You got a wife?" Clara asked softly. "Had one." Emmett stared at the fire. "She's been gone 2 years now." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Wasn't your doing." Clara was quiet for a moment. "My husband's been gone 8 months. But he didn't die. He just left." Emmett looked at her. "Left?" "Took the money, the horse, and the deed to our land. Left me and the children with nothing." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. "We tried to make it work. Took in laundry, sold what we could. But then winter came, and the landlord wanted his rent, and I didn't have it. So we started walking." "Walking where?" "I don't know." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I just knew we couldn't stay. Thought maybe we'd find work in another town. Thought maybe someone would take pity on us." She looked down at the baby in her arms. "I didn't think we'd make it this far." Emmett was quiet for a long time. "You made it," he finally said. "Barely." "Barely's enough." She looked at him, then really looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "Why did you help us?" she asked. "You don't know us. We could be anyone." Emmett thought about the question. He thought about Rebecca and Hannah, about the empty cabin and the silent nights. He thought about the photograph on the wall and the grave under the cottonwood tree. "Because the cold don't care about names," he said. "And neither do I." Clara's eyes filled with tears. But she didn't let them fall. "You're a good man, Mr. Holloway." "I'm just a man, Mrs. Whitmore. Ain't nothing special about that." But she shook her head like she didn't believe him. The next morning, Emmett woke to find Tommy standing over him. The boy's face was set in hard lines, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked like a man trying to decide whether to fight or run. "You want something?" Emmett asked, sitting up in his chair. "I want to know what you want from us." Emmett blinked. "Excuse me. Nobody helps for free." Tommy's voice was tight, controlled. "My pa used to say that. Said every man's got a price, so what's yours?" Emmett looked at the boy. 12 years old, maybe 13. Old enough to have learned that the world was cruel. Old enough to have stopped believing in kindness. "I don't want nothing from you," Emmett said. "I don't believe you." "That's your right." Emmett stood, stretching the stiffness from his back. "But it's still the truth." Tommy's jaw worked. "If you try to hurt my mama or my sisters, I'll kill you." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and real. Emmett didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. He just looked at this boy and saw something he recognized. Fear dressed up as courage, love pretending to be strength. "If I ever try to hurt your mama or your sisters," Emmett said quietly, "I'll hand you the gun myself." Tommy stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly some of the tension drained from his shoulders. "You mean that every word?" The boy nodded once, quick and sharp. Then he turned and walked away. But something had changed. Something had shifted. And Emmett knew that whatever came next, he wasn't facing it alone. The days began to blur together. Clara's ankle slowly healed, though she still limped when she walked. The children grew stronger, their cheeks filling out their eyes, losing that hollow, hungry look. The baby Daniel started crying again. Emmett had never thought he'd be grateful to hear a baby scream, but he was. The cabin that had been built for 2 now held 9. It should have felt crowded. It should have felt overwhelming. But instead, it felt right. Lizzie helped Emmett with the horses, asking questions about everything from saddles to horseshoes. Sam followed him around the barn like a shadow, eager to learn any skill Emmett would teach. Maggie and Rose played in the corners, building towers out of firewood and pretending they were princesses in a castle. And Will. Little Will, who hadn't spoken a word since his father left, started following Emmett everywhere. He didn't talk. He didn't need to. He just stayed close like a duckling who'd finally found something worth following. Clara noticed. "He likes you," she said one evening, watching Emmett whittle a small horse while Will sat at his feet. "He's a good boy." "He hasn't spoken in 8 months, not since his father." She trailed off. "He'll talk when he's ready." "You think so?" Emmett looked down at the boy, at his serious face and his watchful eyes. "I think he's got plenty to say. He's just waiting for someone worth saying it to." Clara's breath caught, but she didn't argue. 1 week passed, then 2. The snow kept falling, trapping them together in the small cabin. But nobody complained. The children had stopped jumping at every sound. Clara had stopped looking over her shoulder every time she heard a noise outside. Even Tommy had begun to relax, though he still watched Emmett with careful eyes. They were becoming something. Not a family. Not yet, but something. One night after the children had fallen asleep, Clara sat beside Emmett by the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across her face, and Emmett thought not for the first time that she was beautiful. Not in the soft, gentle way Rebecca had been beautiful, but in a fierce, surviving way, like a wildflower that had pushed through stone. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "Your wife, the one in the photograph." Clara nodded toward the picture on the wall. "What was she like?" Emmett was quiet for a long moment. "She was kind," he finally said. "Kinder than anyone I ever knew. She used to leave food on the porch for travelers passing through. Used to sit up all night with sick neighbors, even when she was tired. She never turned anyone away." He paused. "Even when I told her we couldn't afford to keep helping folks, she just smiled and said, 'We can't afford not to.'" Clara's eyes were soft. "She sounds wonderful." She was. Emmett stared at the photograph. "And now she's gone. I'm sorry." "Don't be." He turned to look at her. "She would have liked you, I think. She would have liked your children. She would have opened that door and let you in without a second thought. But you did open the door." "I almost didn't." The words came out before he could stop them. "I almost stayed inside and pretended I didn't hear that cry. 2 years ago, I would have gone out without hesitating. But after Rebecca, after Hannah," he shook his head, "I forgot how to care about anything." Clara reached out and touched his hand, just a brush of fingers light as a whisper. "You remembered," she said. Emmett looked at her hand on his. Small, rough, scarred from work and weather. A survivor's hand. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess I did." The next morning, everything changed. Emmett was in the barn when he heard the horse. He stepped outside and saw a rider coming up the road, moving slow through the snow. The man wore a black coat and a wide-brimmed hat, and even from a distance there was something wrong about him. Emmett felt his stomach tighten. Clara appeared at the cabin door, her face pale. "Get inside," Emmett said. "Who is it?" "I don't know, but I don't like the look of him." The rider drew closer. When he was 50 feet away, he stopped and tipped his hat. "Morning," he called out. "Name's Silas Brandt. I'm looking for a woman named Clara Whitmore." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Emmett stepped forward, putting himself between the rider and the cabin. "There's no one here by that name." Silas smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Now see, I think there is." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Her husband owed me money. $200 to be exact. He ran off before he could pay it, and now the debt falls to his wife." His eyes found Clara standing frozen in the doorway. "Hello, Mrs. Whitmore. It's been a while." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't have your money." "I know you don't." Silas's smile widened. "But there are other ways to pay." Emmett's hand moved to the rifle at his side. "I think you should leave," he said. "I think you should mind your own business." Silas's eyes were cold. "This is between me and the lady. The lady's under my roof. That makes it my business." The two men stared at each other. The wind blew, the snow fell, and somewhere inside the cabin, a child started to cry. Silas laughed. "You want to die for a woman you just met, for 7 children that ain't even yours?" Emmett didn't blink. "Get off my land." For a long moment, Silas didn't move. Then he pulled his horse around and started back down the road. "This ain't over," he called over his shoulder. "I'll be back, and next time I won't be alone." He disappeared into the white. Emmett stood there until he was gone, rifle still in his hand, heart pounding in his chest. Clara stumbled toward him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I should have—" "You didn't know he'd find you." "But he did. And now you're in danger. Your home, your ranch, everything." She was shaking now, her whole body trembling. "We should leave. We should go before he comes back." Emmett looked at her. Then he looked at the cabin, at the 7 children watching through the window with frightened eyes. "You ain't going anywhere," he said. "But—" "I said you ain't going anywhere." His voice was firm but gentle. "That man wants a fight. He'll get one. But he ain't getting you. He ain't getting those children. Not while I'm still breathing." Clara stared at him, her eyes wide with something that looked like hope. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for us?" Emmett thought about the question. He thought about Rebecca's kindness. He thought about Hannah's bright eyes. He thought about the empty cabin and the silent nights and the 2 years he'd spent waiting to feel something again. And then he looked at Clara, at her fierce surviving heart, at the love that had kept 7 children alive through impossible odds. "Because some things are worth fighting for," he said. And for the first time in 2 years, Emmett Holloway believed it. Clara couldn't sleep that night. She lay on the floor beside her children, listening to their breathing, counting their heartbeats like she always did. 7. All 7 still here. All 7 still alive. But for how long Silas Brandt's face burned in her mind. That smile. Those cold, empty eyes. The way he'd looked at her like she was property, like she was something to be owned and used and thrown away. She'd thought she was done running. She'd thought for just a moment that maybe she'd found somewhere safe. She'd been wrong. "You're still awake." Clara turned her head. Emmett sat in his chair by the dying fire, his rifle across his knees. He hadn't moved in hours. "So are you," she whispered. "Somebody's got to keep watch." "You think he'll come back tonight?" "No." Emmett's voice was quiet, but certain. "Men like Silas don't work alone. He'll go back to town, gather his people, make a plan. He'll want to make sure he wins before he strikes." Clara sat up slowly, careful not to wake the children. "How do you know men like him?" "I fought in the war." Emmett stared at the embers. "Saw plenty of men who'd rather take than earn. Silas ain't special. He's just mean and patient. That's a dangerous combination. I should leave." The words came out before Clara could stop them. "Before he comes back. Before you get hurt because of me." Emmett turned to look at her. In the dim light, his eyes were steady and calm. "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere. Anywhere." "In the middle of winter, with 7 children and a bad ankle." He shook his head. "You wouldn't make it 20 miles. "Then what am I supposed to do?" Clara's voice cracked. "Just sit here and wait for him to come take me. You're supposed to trust me." The words hung between them, heavy and real. "I don't know how to do that," Clara whispered. "I trusted my husband. He left me with nothing." "I ain't your husband." "No." She looked at him, at his scarred hands, and his tired eyes, and the rifle he held like a promise. "No, you're not." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Emmett spoke again, his voice softer than before. "Get some sleep, Clara. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "What happens tomorrow?" "We go into town." Clara's heart stopped. "What?" "We need supplies. And I need to know what Silas is telling people about you." Emmett's jaw tightened. "If he's spreading lies, I want to hear them for myself. I can't go into town. If people see me, if they know I'm here, they already know." Emmett stood setting the rifle against the wall. "Small town like this, word travels fast. Silas will make sure of that. So we go in heads high and we show them we ain't afraid." "But I am afraid." Emmett walked toward her and stopped. He didn't touch her, didn't reach for her hand, but he stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Fear ain't weakness," he said. "It's just information. Tells you something matters enough to fight for." He paused. "So the question is, Mrs. Whitmore, what are you willing to fight for?" Clara looked at her children sleeping peaceful for the first time in months. "Everything," she said. Emmett nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." The morning came cold and gray. Clara woke to find Tommy already up, standing by the window with his fists clenched at his sides. His face was pale. "Mama." "What is it?" "There's someone outside." Clara's blood went cold. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her ankle, and pushed past Tommy to look. A woman stood at the edge of the property, bundled in a heavy coat with a basket over her arm. She was older, maybe 50, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and a face that looked like it had seen plenty of hard winters. "Who is that?" Clara whispered. "Don't know." Tommy's voice was tight. "But she's been standing there for 10 minutes. Emmett appeared in the doorway, already dressed, his coat buttoned to the neck. "That's Martha," he said. "Martha. My sister." Clara's stomach dropped. "Your sister." Emmett was already walking toward the door. "Stay here." He stepped outside and crossed the yard toward the woman. Clara watched through the window, her heart pounding as the two of them spoke. Martha's face was hard, her gestures sharp. Emmett's shoulders were stiff. They argued. Clara couldn't hear the words, but she could see the tension. The way Martha kept pointing toward the cabin. The way Emmett kept shaking his head. The way his hands curled into fists at his sides. Finally, Martha turned and walked away without looking back. Emmett stood there for a long moment alone in the cold. Then he came back inside. "What did she want?" Clara asked. "To warn me." Emmett's voice was flat. "Town's talking. They know you're here. They know about the children. And they're saying things. Bad things." He met her eyes. "About you. About us." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of things?" "The kind that don't matter." Emmett pulled off his gloves and threw them on the table. "Martha says I'm making a fool of myself. Says I'm ruining what's left of my reputation by taking in a strange woman and her brood." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She says I should send you away before it's too late." "Maybe you should." "Maybe I should mind my own business and let the whole world tell me how to live." Emmett turned to face her, his eyes fierce. "I spent 2 years doing what everyone expected, grieving proper, keeping quiet, staying out of sight. And you know what it got me? Nothing. Just empty rooms and cold nights and a heart that forgot how to beat. He stepped closer. Then you showed up, you and 7 children who needed somebody to care, and for the first time since Rebecca died, I felt like I had a reason to wake up in the morning. His voice dropped. So don't you dare tell me to send you away. Don't you dare make me go back to that emptiness. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Emmett, we're going into town, he said. Today, together. And anyone who's got a problem with that can take it up with me. She nodded, unable to speak. Get the children ready. The wagon ride into town took nearly an hour. Clara sat in the back with the younger children holding Daniel close to her chest. The baby was awake for once, his eyes wide and curious as he watched the world pass by. Rose and Maggie huddled together under a blanket whispering secrets. Sam sat next to Tommy, their shoulders touching. Lizzie sat up front with Emmett. Clara watched them talking quietly. Lizzie's small hand resting on the seat between them. The girl had taken to Emmett in a way Clara hadn't expected. She asked him questions about everything: the horses, the land, the weather, his life. And Emmett answered every one patient and kind, like her curiosity was the most natural thing in the world. Will sat alone at the back of the wagon, his knees pulled to his chest. He hadn't spoken, not once. But his eyes never left Emmett. The town appeared slowly through the gray morning light. Clara's chest tightened. She could see people stopping on the street, turning to watch the wagon roll in. Whispers spread like wildfire. Women pulled their children closer. Men crossed their arms and stared. Emmett pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the general store and climbed down. Stay here, he said to Clara. I'll get the supplies. I should come with you. Not yet. Let me see how bad it is first. He walked into the store. Clara waited, her heart hammering, her hands trembling as she held Daniel close. A woman approached the wagon. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with a face like a closed door. You're the woman. It wasn't a question. Clara lifted her chin. I'm Clara Whitmore. I know who you are. The woman's eyes swept over the children like they were dirt. Everyone knows. You're the one shacking up with Emmett Holloway, the one with all those children and no ring. I'm not shacking up with anyone. That's not what I heard. The woman smiled, thin and sharp. I heard you showed up half dead on his doorstep and decided to stay. I heard you're paying for your room and board in ways that ain't proper. Tommy stood up in the wagon, his face red with fury. You take that back. Tommy, sit down, Clara said. She's lying, Mama. I said sit down. The boy obeyed, but his fists were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Clara turned back to the woman, her voice steady, despite the shaking in her chest. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through or what my children have suffered. You just know what you've heard, and what you've heard is wrong. The woman's smile didn't waver. Maybe. Or maybe you're exactly what they say you are. A desperate woman who'll do anything to survive. That part's true. Clara's voice hardened. I am desperate, and I will do anything to keep my children alive. But not what you're thinking. Never that. The woman stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away without another word. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Lizzie touched her arm. Mama, are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Clara forced a smile. I'm fine. But she wasn't. Not even close. Emmett came out of the store with a sack of flour over his shoulder and a look on his face that told Clara everything had not gone well. What happened? She asked as he loaded the supplies. Nothing I couldn't handle. Emmett. He stopped and turned to face her. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. Silas has been talking, telling everyone you're his property now, that your husband sold you to him to pay off his debt. Clara's blood went ice cold. That's not true. I know it ain't, but it don't matter what's true. It matters what people believe. Emmett climbed into the wagon and took the reins. And right now half this town believes you belong to Silas Brandt. So, what do? We prove them wrong. The ride back was quiet. The children could sense something was wrong. Even Rose and Maggie stopped whispering, their small faces troubled. Tommy stared at the road behind them, like he expected someone to follow. Lizzie sat close to Clara, holding her hand. Will had moved closer to Emmett, close enough that his shoulder touched the big man's arm. Emmett didn't pull away. They were halfway home when Tommy spoke. "He's coming back, isn't he, that man from yesterday?" Emmett didn't lie. "Probably. And you're going to fight him. If I have to." Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Teach me." Emmett turned to look at him. "Teach you what?" "How to fight, how to shoot." Tommy's voice was steady, but Clara could see his hands shaking. "If he's coming for my mama, I want to be ready." "Tommy, no," Clara said. "You're 12 years old. You shouldn't have to." "I'm the man of this family," Tommy said. "Pa left. That means it's my job to protect everyone now, and I can't do that if I don't know how." Clara opened her mouth to argue, but Emmett spoke first. "All right." "Emmett?" Clara's voice was sharp. "He's right, Clara." Emmett's voice was calm. "If trouble comes, everyone needs to know how to handle themselves. That includes Tommy." He looked at the boy. "We'll start tomorrow, but you do exactly what I say when I say it. No arguments, no shortcuts. Understood?" Tommy nodded, his eyes bright. "Yes, sir." "And Tommy?" Emmett's voice softened. "Being a man ain't about fighting. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. Remember that." "I will." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to scream that her boy was too young for this, too innocent, too precious to be turned into a soldier. But when she looked at Tommy's face, she saw something she hadn't seen in months. Hope. That night, Clara found Emmett on the porch. He sat on the steps, staring out at the darkening sky, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. She lowered herself beside him, wincing at the pain in her ankle. "You shouldn't have agreed to teach him," she said quietly. "Maybe not. He's just a boy." "I know." Emmett took a sip of his coffee. "But he's a boy who's trying to be a man, and if I don't teach him right, he'll teach himself wrong." Clara sighed. "When did everything get so complicated?" "The day your husband walked out that door, I imagine." She laughed, soft and bitter. "Yeah, I suppose so." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars come out one by one. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said. "Go ahead." "Why didn't you send me away that first night? When you found us in the snow, you could have just kept walking, pretended you didn't see." Emmett was quiet for a long moment. "I almost did," he finally said. "I heard that cry, and my first thought was to go back inside, to close the door, and pretend it wasn't my problem." He shook his head. "But then I thought about Rebecca, about what she would have done, and I knew if I walked away, I'd never be able to look at her photograph again." Clara's throat tightened. "You loved her. More than anything in this world." He turned to look at her. "But she's gone now, and I'm still here, and I've got to figure out what that means." "What does it mean?" Emmett held her gaze. "I don't know yet, but I'm starting to think it might mean something good." Clara felt her heart skip. She looked away suddenly, unable to meet his eyes. "I should go check on the children." "Clara." She stopped but didn't turn around. "Whatever happens tomorrow or the day after or next week." Emmett's voice was low and sure. "I ain't going anywhere. You understand?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Then she went inside and closed the door behind her. 3 days passed. 3 days of routine and rhythm. Of meals shared around a crowded table. Of children's laughter filling rooms that had been silent for too long. Of Clara's voice humming while she worked. Of Emmett teaching Tommy how to hold a rifle. 3 days of almost peace. On the 4th day, it shattered. Emmett was in the barn when he heard the horses. Too many horses. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside just as 5 riders crested the hill. Silas Brandt was in front. Behind him rode 4 men Clara didn't recognize. Hard faces, cold eyes, guns on their hips. They spread out as they approached, forming a half circle around the cabin. Clara pulled the children inside and bolted the door. "Stay away from the windows," she ordered. "Tommy, take the little ones to the back room. Lizzie, help him." "But Mama." "Now." The children scattered. Clara pressed herself against the wall by the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Outside, Emmett stood alone. "Morning, Holloway." Silas's voice was casual, friendly almost. "Nice day for a visit." "Get off my land, Brandt." "Now that ain't very hospitable." Silas dismounted and walked toward the cabin, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. "I just came to collect what's mine." "There's nothing here that belongs to you." "Oh, but there is." Silas smiled. "See, Samuel Whitmore owed me $200, and before he ran off like the coward he was, he signed over his wife's debt to me. Legal and proper. I've got the paperwork right here." He pulled a folded document from his coat and held it up. "This says Clara Whitmore is my property until the debt is paid. Now I'm a reasonable man. I don't want any trouble. So here's what's going to happen. She's going to come out of that cabin, and she's going to come with me. And you're going to let her go because it's the law." Emmett didn't move. "That paper ain't worth the ink it's written with. A man can't sell his wife like livestock." "Maybe not where you come from, but out here things work different." Silas's smile widened. "Out here a debt is a debt, and one way or another, Clara Whitmore is going to pay hers." The cabin door opened. Clara stepped out, her chin held high, her hands trembling at her sides. "Clara, get back inside," Emmett said. "No." She walked past him and stopped 10 feet from Silas. "You want to talk about my husband's debt? Fine. Let's talk." Silas looked amused. Well, the lady speaks. That debt was Samuel's, not mine. I never signed anything. I never agreed to anything. Whatever deal you made with him, it died when he ran." "That ain't how this works, sweetheart." "Don't call me that." Clara's voice was cold. "I'm not your sweetheart. I'm not your property, and I'm not going anywhere with you." Silas's smile disappeared. "You think you've got a choice here?" He stepped closer, close enough that Clara could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Look around. I've got 5 men. Your boyfriend's got 1 gun. How do you think this ends?" "It ends," Emmett said quietly, "with you getting back on that horse and riding away. Or it ends with me putting a bullet between your eyes." The air went still. Silas turned to face Emmett, his eyes narrowing. "You'd die for her, a woman you barely know." "I'd die for what's right." Emmett raised his rifle. "Now get off my land." For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. Then Silas laughed. "All right, Holloway. All right." He raised his hands and backed toward his horse. "You win this round. But mark my words, this ain't over. Not by a long shot." He mounted and looked down at Clara one last time. "I'll be seeing you, Mrs. Whitmore. Real soon." Then he turned and rode away, his men following behind like shadows. Clara's legs gave out. Emmett caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest. She was shaking so hard she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but hold on. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're okay. They're gone. They'll come back. I know. What are we going to do?" Emmett held her tighter. "We're going to fight." That night, Emmett didn't sleep. He sat by the window, with his rifle watching the darkness, waiting for shadows that didn't come. Clara sat beside him, her shoulder pressed against his. "Tell me about Hannah," she said softly. Emmett was quiet for a long time. She was 3 when she died, he finally said. Had Rebecca's smile and my stubbornness. Used to follow me around the ranch asking questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do horses have 4 legs? Why does Mama cry sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking? His voice cracked. She got sick on a Tuesday. By Friday she was gone. Rebecca went a week later. I buried them both under that tree out back. He closed his eyes. Some days I still hear her voice, asking me questions I can't answer. Clara reached for his hand and held it tight. I'm sorry. Don't be. He opened his eyes and looked at her. For 2 years I thought I'd never feel anything again. Then you came along with your 7 children and your broken ankle and your stubborn pride. And suddenly, I remembered what it felt like to care about something. Clara's breath caught. Emmett! I ain't asking for nothing, he said quickly. I know you've been hurt. I know you've got no reason to trust anyone. But I need you to know that whatever happens next, I'm grateful. For these weeks. For your children. For you. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his cheek. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. When she pulled back, his eyes were bright. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we start planning. Planning what? Emmett's jaw set. How to end this, once and for all. The planning started before dawn. Emmett spread a rough map across the table, marking positions with small stones. Clara stood beside him, her arms crossed, her face pale, but determined. The children were still asleep in the back room, their breathing soft and steady. Silas won't come at us head-on again, Emmett said. He knows I'll shoot, so he'll try something else. Come at night maybe, or catch us on the road. What do? We don't give him the chance. Emmett pointed to a spot on the map. There's a sheriff in Laramie. Real law, not like the deputies Silas has bought here. If we can get word to him, show him that paper Silas is waving around is fraudulent. How do we prove that? Your husband, Samuel, did he sign anything before he left? Any documents, any papers? Clara's jaw tightened at the mention of her husband's name. I don't know. He handled all of that. I never... She stopped, her eyes widening. Wait. What? The deed to our land. Samuel tried to sell it before he left, but the bank wouldn't let him because my name was on it too. I never signed the transfer. Clara's voice quickened. If my name was required to sell the land, then my name would be required to transfer any debt, and I never signed anything for Silas. Emmett's eyes lit up. You got proof of that. The deed, the bank papers. I had them. In a lockbox. But when we left, Clara's face fell. I couldn't carry everything. I had to choose between papers and food for the children. Where's the lockbox now? Back at our old place, if it's still there. She shook her head. But that's 50 miles east, through territory Silas controls. We'd never make it. You wouldn't. Emmett straightened. But I might. No. Clara grabbed his arm. You can't leave us here alone. If Silas comes while you're gone, then we need another way. Emmett was quiet for a moment, thinking. My sister, Martha. She doesn't like you, but she hates Silas more. He cheated her husband out of a cattle deal 3 years back. Nearly ruined them. You think she'd help? I think she'd help if it meant hurting Silas. Emmett grabbed his coat. I'm going to talk to her. You stay here. Keep the doors locked. Don't let anyone in. Emmett? He stopped at the door and turned. I'll be back before dark. I promise. Then he was gone. Clara stood alone in the silent cabin, her heart pounding. She had never felt so afraid in her life. The morning passed slow. Clara kept the children busy with chores, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. Tommy stood guard by the window, the rifle Emmett had given him clutched in his hands. He was too young for this. They all were. Lizzie helped Clara prepare what food they had left. The girl was quiet, her usual questions silenced by the tension in the air. Mama, she finally said. Yes, sweetheart. Are we going to have to leave again? Clara's hands stilled over the pot she was stirring. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But whatever happens, we'll face it together." "Okay." Lizzie nodded, but her eyes were worried. In the corner, Will sat alone drawing shapes in the dust with his finger. He hadn't looked up once since Emmett left. Clara watched him, her heart aching. The boy had attached himself to Emmett in a way he'd never attached to anyone, not even Samuel. And now Emmett was gone, and Will was retreating again into that silent, unreachable place. Clara crossed the room and knelt beside him. "He'll come back," she whispered. "I promise." Will didn't respond, but his hand reached out and touched hers just for a moment. It was enough. The knock came at noon. Clara's blood went cold. Tommy raised the rifle, his hands shaking. "Who's there?" Clara called. "It's Martha Holloway. Open the door." Clara exchanged a look with Tommy, then slowly unbolted the door. Martha stood on the porch, her face grim. Behind her was another woman, older with silver hair and sharp eyes. "This is Doc Foster," Martha said without preamble. "She's going to help." Clara stepped back to let them in, her mind racing. "Help how? Emmett came to see me this morning." Martha's voice was clipped businesslike. "Told me what Silas is planning. I don't like you, Mrs. Whitmore. I think you're trouble my brother doesn't need. But I hate Silas Brandt more than I hate anything in this world." She turned to Doc Foster. "Tell her." The older woman stepped forward, her eyes kind but serious. "I was there when Silas drew up that paper he's waving around. He paid a drunk named Benson to forge Samuel Whitmore's signature. I saw it happen." She paused. "I'll testify to that in court. Under oath." Clara felt the room spin. "You'd do that for me?" "I'd do it for any woman Silas tried to claim as property." Doc Foster's voice hardened. "He's done this before. 3 times that I know of. Women with no protection, no resources, no way to fight back. He takes them to his saloon and works them until they're used up. Then he throws them away." Clara felt sick. "And no one stops him. The sheriff here is in his pocket. The judge owes him money." Martha's lip curled. "This town is rotten, Mrs. Whitmore. Has been for years. But if we can get proof to Laramie to someone who isn't bought and paid for, we might have a chance." "What kind of proof?" "That lockbox you mentioned." Martha pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. "Emmett told me where your old place is. I sent my husband and 2 of his men to fetch it this morning. They should be back by tomorrow night." Clara stared at her. "You did that for me." "I did it to destroy Silas." Martha's eyes were hard. "Don't mistake this for friendship. Once this is over, I expect you and your children to leave my brother alone." The words hit Clara like a slap. But before she could respond, Doc Foster spoke. "Martha, that's enough. It's the truth. It's cruel." The doctor turned to Clara, her voice gentle. "Don't mind her. She's been protecting Emmett since they were children. She doesn't know how to stop." Martha's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Clara took a breath, steadying herself. "Thank you, both of you. Whatever your reasons, I'm grateful." Martha nodded once, sharp and quick. "Silas won't move until he thinks he's got the advantage. That gives us 2, maybe 3 days. Stay inside. Stay quiet. And for God's sake, don't give him any excuse." Then she turned and walked out, leaving Clara standing in the middle of the cabin with more hope than she'd felt in weeks, and more fear. Emmett returned at dusk. Clara heard the horse before she saw him, and she was at the door before he'd even dismounted. Tommy lowered the rifle, his shoulders sagging with relief. "Martha came," Clara said, as Emmett stepped inside. "She brought Doc Foster." "I know." Emmett pulled off his coat and hung it by the door. "I stopped by her place on the way back. Her husband left this morning with 2 men. If all goes well, they'll have your lockbox by tomorrow night. And then we ride to Laramie and show the real sheriff what Silas has been doing." Emmett's eyes met hers. "Then this ends." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to so badly it hurt, but something in her chest wouldn't let her. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked quietly. "What if Silas gets to us before Martha's husband gets back? What if the sheriff in Laramie doesn't believe us? Clara, what if something happens to you?" Her voice cracked. "Because of me. Because I brought this trouble to your door." Emmett crossed the room and took her hands in his. They were rough, calloused, warm. "Listen to me," he said. "I've been dead for 2 years, walking around breathing, eating, sleeping, but dead inside. Then you came along, and for the first time since Rebecca, I felt something. Something real." His grip tightened. "Whatever happens, I don't regret any of it. Not one moment. You understand?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I can't lose anyone else. I can't." "You won't." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But when she closed her eyes that night, all she could see was Silas's smile. The next morning brought trouble. Clara woke to the sound of shouting. She scrambled to her feet, her heart racing, and ran to the window. Tommy was outside, standing between Emmett and a man Clara didn't recognize. The man was young, maybe 20, with a bruised face and torn clothes. "I ain't lying," the man shouted. "Silas sent me to deliver a message, that's all. Then deliver it and get off my land," Emmett growled. The man reached into his coat. Tommy raised his rifle. "Easy." The man held up his hands. "It's just a letter, that's all." He pulled out a folded piece of paper and threw it on the ground at Emmett's feet. "Silas says he's done waiting. He says if Mrs. Whitmore ain't at his saloon by sundown tomorrow, he's coming to get her himself. And this time he ain't coming alone." Emmett didn't pick up the letter. "Tell Silas he can go to hell." "I'll tell him." The man backed toward his horse. "But you're making a mistake, Holloway. Silas don't lose. Never has. And the people who fight him don't live long enough to regret it." He mounted and rode away. Clara stepped onto the porch, her body shaking. "Sundown tomorrow," she whispered. "That's not enough time. Martha's husband should be back tonight." Emmett bent and picked up the letter, scanning it quickly. "If he gets that lockbox, and if he doesn't..." Emmett was silent. That was answer enough. The day passed in tense silence. Every noise made Clara jump. Every shadow at the window made her heart stop. The children sensed the fear and stayed quiet, huddled together like animals sensing a storm. Tommy cleaned his rifle over and over his young face set in hard lines. Lizzie held Rose on her lap, singing soft songs to keep the toddler calm. Sam sat with Maggie playing a game with stones that neither of them cared about. And Will. Will had stopped drawing. He sat in the corner with his arms wrapped around his knees, staring at nothing. Clara went to him, knelt down, pressed a kiss to his forehead. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. Will looked at her with eyes too old for his 5 years. He didn't believe her. Neither did she. Night fell. Martha's husband hadn't returned. Emmett paced by the window, his face dark with worry. Clara sat by the fire, Daniel asleep in her arms, trying to pretend everything was normal. It wasn't working. "Maybe they got delayed," she said. "The weather or..." "Maybe." Emmett's voice was tight. "Or maybe Silas found out what they were doing." Clara's blood went cold. "You think he'd hurt them?" "I think Silas would do anything to get what he wants." Emmett stopped pacing and turned to face her. "We need to prepare for the possibility that help isn't coming." "What does that mean?" "It means tomorrow when Silas shows up, we might have to fight alone." Clara looked at her children. Tommy trying so hard to be brave, Lizzie with her gentle heart and quick mind, Sam and Maggie still young enough to believe the world was good, Will locked in his silent prison, Rose too small to understand, Daniel just a baby, 7 children, 7 reasons to live, and one terrible truth she couldn't escape. "I should go," she said quietly. Emmett stared at her. "What? To Silas?" If I go to him, he'll leave you alone. He'll leave the children alone. They can stay here with you safe. Clara, no. It's the only way. Her voice broke. Don't you see? He doesn't want you. He doesn't want them. He wants me. And as long as I'm here, everyone I love is in danger. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't care. I can't watch my children die because of me. I can't watch you die because of me. I'd rather... Emmett crossed the room in 3 strides and took her face in his hands. Listen to me, he said, his voice fierce. You are not going to Silas. Not tomorrow, not ever. Whatever he's promised, whatever he's threatened, I don't care. You belong here. With your children. With me. Emmett, I love you. The words hung in the air between them, raw and real and terrifying. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. What? I love you. His voice was steady now, certain. I didn't plan it. I didn't want it. But it happened anyway, and I'm done pretending otherwise. His thumb brushed the tears from her cheek. So don't you dare talk about leaving. Don't you dare give up. Because I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever. Clara couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything but look into his eyes and see the truth there. He meant it. Every word. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. He pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. So am I. But we're going to get through this. Together. She closed her eyes and held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. For that moment, it was enough. The sound of hoofbeats shattered the silence. Emmett grabbed his rifle and ran to the door. Clara's heart stopped. But it wasn't Silas. It was Martha's husband Frank riding hard up the road with 2 men behind him. And in his hand, clutched like treasure, was a small metal box. We got it, Frank shouted as he dismounted. Barely made it out. Silas had men watching the place, but we slipped past them in the dark. Emmett took the lockbox, his hands trembling. The papers. All there. Deed, bank documents, everything. Frank was breathing hard, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. That paper Silas has been waving around, it's a fake. Your wife's signature ain't on anything. Clara felt her knees buckle. Emmett caught her, held her up. It's over, she whispered. It's really over. Not yet. Frank's face was grim. We ride for Laramie at first light. If we can get to the sheriff before Silas realizes what we've got, we can end this. And if we can't... Frank didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, no one slept. Clara sat with her children, holding them close, memorizing the feel of them against her. Tommy leaned his head on her shoulder, his bravery finally cracking enough to show the frightened boy underneath. Lizzie held her hand. Sam and Maggie were curled together asleep at last. Rose was in her lap. Daniel was in her arms. And Will had moved. For the first time in days, he'd left his corner. He crossed the room slow and uncertain and stopped in front of Emmett. The big man looked down at him. Hey there, partner. Will reached out and took Emmett's hand. Then, in a voice rusty from months of silence, he spoke. Don't go. Clara's heart shattered. Emmett dropped to his knees, eye level with the boy. I have to, he said gently. But I'm coming back. I promise. Will's lip trembled. Pa said that. Pa didn't come back. I ain't your pa. Emmett's voice was fierce but tender. And I don't make promises I can't keep. When I say I'm coming back, I mean it. You believe me. Will looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay. Emmett pulled him into a hug, and Clara watched through tears as the silent boy finally broke down and cried. Dawn came too soon. Emmett stood on the porch with Frank and his men, the lockbox secured in his saddlebag. Clara stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself. Stay inside, Emmett said. Don't open the door for anyone except Martha or Doc Foster. I'll be back as soon as I can. How long? 2 days, maybe 3. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. If I'm not back in 4 days, don't. Clara's voice cracked. Don't say it. Clara, just come back. She grabbed his coat and pulled him close. Promise me you'll come back. He kissed her then. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, fierce, full of all the words they didn't have time to say. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. I promise. Then he mounted his horse and rode away. Clara watched until he disappeared over the horizon. Then she went inside, closed the door, and waited. The first day passed. Martha came by with food and news. Silas knew they'd gotten the lockbox. He was furious, but he hadn't moved yet. He was waiting, calculating, trying to figure out his next move. He won't give up, Martha warned. Men like him never do. Clara nodded, but her mind was far away following Emmett down the road to Laramie. The second day was worse. Tommy stood guard at the window, refusing to leave his post even to eat. Lizzie tried to keep the younger children calm, but her own fear showed in her trembling hands. Will had started speaking again, small words here and there, but he kept asking the same question. When is he coming back? Clara didn't have an answer. On the third day they came. Clara heard the horses first. Too many horses. She ran to the window and felt her blood turn to ice. Silas Brandt rode at the head of a dozen men. They spread out as they approached, surrounding the cabin. Mrs. Whitmore, Silas called out. I know you're in there. I know Holloway's gone. And I know you've got something that belongs to me. Clara pulled the children away from the windows. Tommy, take them to the back room. Mama, I can fight. Take them now. Tommy's face crumpled, but he obeyed. Lizzie grabbed Will's hand. Sam lifted Rose. One by one they disappeared into the back of the cabin. Clara picked up the rifle Emmett had left her. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. I'm giving you one chance, Silas shouted. Come out now, and I'll let the children live. Make me come in there and I can't promise anything. Clara's finger found the trigger. She thought about Emmett, about his promise to come back, about the way he'd looked at her when he'd said he loved her. She thought about her children, 7 small lives depending on her to keep them safe. She thought about everything she'd survived to get here. The hunger, the cold, the walking, the fear. She'd survived all of it. She'd survived this too. Clara opened the door and stepped outside. That's far enough, she said, raising the rifle. You want me? Come and get me. Silas smiled. With pleasure. He dismounted and walked toward her, slow and confident. You've got spirit, Mrs. Whitmore. I'll give you that. But spirit don't stop bullets. He glanced at the rifle in her hands. You ever fired one of those before? No. Then you're not going to hit anything. Maybe not. Clara's voice was steady, despite the terror in her chest. But I'll die trying. Silas stopped 10 feet from her. It doesn't have to be like this, he said. Come with me willingly, and your children can stay here. They'll be safe, fed, protected. All you have to do is put down that gun. Clara's grip tightened. I'd rather die. That can be arranged. He raised his hand. Behind him, his men drew their weapons. Clara closed her eyes. And that's when she heard it. Hoofbeats, coming fast. She opened her eyes and saw them cresting the hill. Emmett, Frank, a dozen men in badges, and leading them all a man with silver hair and a star on his chest. The sheriff of Laramie. Silas's face went white. What the... Silas Brandt! The sheriff's voice rang out across the field. You're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and the illegal trafficking of women. Drop your weapons. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Silas ran. He made it 3 steps before Emmett's horse cut him off. The big man dismounted and grabbed Silas by the collar, slamming him to the ground. Going somewhere? Silas struggled, cursing, but Emmett held him down until the sheriff's men took over. Clara dropped the rifle. Her legs gave out. Emmett caught her before she hit the ground. "It's over," he whispered, holding her close. "It's really over." Clara looked at Silas being dragged away in chains, at the men who had threatened her children now surrounded and disarmed, at the sheriff who tipped his hat to her with a kind smile. Then she looked at Emmett, at his scarred hands, his tired eyes, his fierce protective heart. "You came back," she whispered. "I promised." She buried her face in his chest and cried. Behind her the cabin door opened. 7 children spilled out, running toward their mother, toward the man who had saved them. Tommy reached them first, his face wet with tears he wasn't even trying to hide. "Is it over?" he asked. "Is it really over?" Emmett looked at Clara, at the children, at the family that had somehow become his. "Yeah," he said quietly, "it's over." But even as he said it, Clara saw something flicker in his eyes, and she knew that for both of them, something new was just beginning. The sheriff and his men took Silas away in chains. Clara watched them go, her body pressed against Emmett's chest, her children gathered around her like a shield. She should have felt relief, should have felt joy, but all she felt was numb. "Mama." Lizzie tugged at her sleeve. "Are you okay?" Clara looked down at her daughter's worried face and tried to smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." But she wasn't fine. Not really. Because even with Silas gone, even with the danger past, she could feel the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her chest like a stone. Emmett sensed it. He always did. "Let's get everyone inside," he said quietly. "It's cold out here." They moved into the cabin, the children trailing behind like ducklings. Tommy was the last one in, pausing at the door to look back at the road where Silas had disappeared. "He's really gone?" he asked. "He's really gone," Emmett confirmed. Tommy nodded once, then stepped inside and closed the door. For the first time in weeks, the cabin felt safe. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay on the floor beside her children, listening to their breathing, counting their heartbeats. 7. All 7 still here. All 7 safe. But her mind wouldn't stop racing. Silas was gone, but the town wasn't. The whispers weren't. The judgment wasn't. She'd seen the way people looked at her when she came into town. The way they pulled their children closer. The way they whispered behind their hands. A woman with no husband. A woman living in a man's cabin. A woman who had brought trouble and violence to their peaceful community. It didn't matter that she was innocent. It didn't matter that Silas was a criminal. In their eyes, she was tainted. And as long as she stayed here, Emmett would be tainted too. She thought about what Martha had said. "Once this is over, I expect you and your children to leave my brother alone." Maybe she was right. Maybe leaving was the only way to protect Emmett from the damage she'd already done. Clara rose quietly, careful not to wake the children, and slipped outside. The air was cold but clear, the sky full of stars. She walked to the edge of the porch and sat on the steps, wrapping her arms around herself. "Can't sleep." She turned. Emmett stood in the doorway, his coat thrown over his shoulders, his feet bare. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." He crossed the porch and sat beside her. Been awake for hours, couldn't stop thinking. About what? About what happens next. Clara looked at him, her heart aching. "What do you mean?" Emmett was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "Silas is gone. The danger's past. You and the children are safe now." He paused. "You could go anywhere you wanted, start fresh somewhere new, somewhere nobody knows your name or your history." Clara felt the words like a knife to the chest. "Is that what you want?" she whispered. "For us to leave?" Emmett turned to look at her, his eyes fierce. No. God, no. I want you to stay. I want you to stay forever. His voice cracked. But I can't ask you to do that. Not after everything you've been through. Not when there's a whole world out there waiting for you. Clara stared at him. You think I want to leave? I think you deserve better than this. He gestured at the cabin behind them. A broken-down ranch, a broken-down man, and a town full of people who'll never accept you. Emmett? I love you, Clara. I told you that and I meant it, but love ain't enough. Not if it means trapping you somewhere you don't want to be. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. You're not trapping me, she said. You saved me. You saved my children. Everything we have, everything we are, is because of you. That's gratitude. It ain't the same thing. The words hit her like a slap. She stood abruptly, her hands shaking. You think that's all this is? Gratitude? I don't know what it is. Emmett's voice was raw. I just know I can't be the reason you stay somewhere you don't belong. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to shout at him, to shake him, to make him understand, but the words wouldn't come, because part of her wondered if he was right. I need to think, she said. Clara, please, just give me time. She walked back inside and closed the door. Behind her, Emmett sat alone in the cold. The next morning was difficult. Clara moved through the cabin like a ghost, doing the chores she'd done 100 times before, but her mind was elsewhere. The children noticed. They always did. Mama's sad, Rose announced at breakfast. Hush, sweetheart, Lizzie said. Eat your porridge. But Rose wasn't wrong. Clara was sad. Sadder than she'd been in a long time. She kept replaying Emmett's words in her head. Love ain't enough. You deserve better. Gratitude ain't the same thing. Was he right? Was what she felt for him just gratitude dressed up as something more? She'd been so desperate when he found her so broken, so scared. Maybe she'd confused safety with love. Maybe she'd confused rescue with romance. And if that was true, then staying would be a lie. A beautiful, comfortable lie, but a lie nonetheless. Tommy found her by the water pump, staring at nothing. Mama, you okay? Clara blinked and looked at her son. 12 years old, trying so hard to be a man. Trying so hard to hold the family together. I'm fine, she said. You're lying. She almost smiled. When did you get so smart? Pa used to say the same thing, right before he left. The words hung between them, sharp and painful. I'm not leaving, Clara said. Then why do you look like you are? She didn't have an answer. That afternoon, Martha came to visit. Clara was alone in the cabin when the knock came. The children were outside with Emmett, learning how to care for the horses. She opened the door to find Martha standing there, her face unreadable. Mrs. Whitmore? Mrs. Holloway. They stared at each other for a long moment. May I come in? Martha asked. Clara stepped aside. Martha entered the cabin, her eyes sweeping over the space. The quilts on the floor. The children's drawings pinned to the wall. The photograph of Rebecca still hanging above the table. It looks different, she said. Fuller. Is that a complaint? An observation. Martha turned to face her. I came to apologize. Clara blinked. Excuse me, what I said before, about expecting you to leave once this was over. Martha's jaw tightened. It was cruel, and it was wrong. Clara didn't know what to say. I've known my brother his whole life, Martha continued. I was there when he met Rebecca. I was there when he married her and when she died. I watched him disappear into himself and I thought he'd never come back. She paused. Then you showed up, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw him smile. Clara's throat tightened. I don't like change, Martha said. I don't like strangers, and I especially don't like women who show up out of nowhere and turn my brother's life upside down. She took a breath. But I love Emmett, and if you make him happy, then I suppose I'll have to learn to live with you. Clara stared at her. That's the strangest apology I've ever heard. It's the only one you're getting. Despite everything, Clara laughed. Martha's lips twitched, almost a smile. Don't break his heart, she said, or I'll make Silas Brandt look like a kitten. I believe you. Martha nodded once, then turned and walked out. Clara stood alone in the cabin, her mind spinning. But Martha's words had planted a seed. What if she did stay? What if this was where she belonged? What if love was enough after all? She found Emmett in the barn. He was brushing one of the horses, his back to her, his shoulders tense. He knew she was there. He always did. We need to talk, Clara said. Emmett stopped brushing, but didn't turn around. I know. Last night, what you said, I shouldn't have said it. His voice was rough. I was scared. Scared you'd leave, scared you'd stay for the wrong reasons. I pushed you away because I didn't know how to ask you to stay. Clara stepped closer. Then ask me. He turned. His eyes were red like he hadn't slept. What? Ask me to stay. Emmett stared at her for a long moment. Clara, I can't. Yes, you can. She moved toward him close enough to touch. You're the bravest man I've ever met. You faced down Silas and his men without flinching. You rode to Laramie and back to save a woman you barely knew. But you can't ask me one simple question. His jaw worked. It ain't simple. It is. It's the simplest question in the world. She took his hands in hers. Ask me, Emmett. Ask me to stay. He looked at their joined hands, at her face, at the hope in her eyes. Stay, he whispered. Please stay. Clara smiled through her tears. Yes. She kissed him, then soft and sure, and felt something break open in her chest. Something that had been locked away for years. Something she'd thought was dead. Hope. When they finally pulled apart, Emmett was smiling. That easy, huh? That easy. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. I love you, he said. I love you too. For a moment, everything was perfect. Then Tommy's voice rang out from the yard. Mama Emmett, someone's coming. They ran outside. A rider was approaching from the east, moving fast. Clara's heart seized with fear. But as the rider drew closer, she saw it wasn't one of Silas's men. It was Doc Foster. She reined in her horse, her face pale and urgent. You need to come to town, she said. Now. What happened? Emmett demanded. It's Silas. Doc Foster's voice was grim. He escaped. Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. What? Last night. Killed one of the deputies and rode off before anyone could stop him. Doc Foster looked at Clara, her eyes full of fear. He's coming for you. The sheriff found a note in his cell. He swore he'd finish what he started. Emmett's face went hard. Where is he now? Nobody knows. That's why you need to come to town. The sheriff's organizing a search party, but until they find him, we're not safe anywhere, Clara finished. Doc Foster nodded. I'm sorry. Clara looked at Emmett, at her children gathered on the porch with frightened eyes, at the life she'd thought she was finally going to have. And she felt something inside her snap. No. Everyone turned to look at her. No. She said again, louder this time. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I'm done letting that man control my life. Clara, Emmett started. He wants me fine. Let him come. Her voice was steady, her chin high. But I'm not going to sit in town like a scared rabbit waiting for him to find me. I'm going to be right here in my home with my family. And if Silas Brandt wants to take that from me, he's going to have to go through all of us. Tommy stepped forward. I'm with Mama. Lizzie nodded. Me too. Even Will, silent little Will, moved to stand beside his mother. Emmett looked at them all, at this broken, beautiful family that had somehow become his. All right, he said. Then we fight. Doc Foster shook her head. You're all crazy. Probably, Emmett agreed. But we're crazy together. He turned to Clara and took her hand. Whatever happens next, we face it as a family. Deal. Clara squeezed his fingers. Deal. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Emmett boarded up the windows and reinforced the doors. Tommy helped him set up positions around the cabin places where they could take cover if shooting started. Clara gathered supplies and made sure the children knew where to hide. But even as they worked, Clara's mind was racing. Silas wasn't stupid. He wouldn't come at them head-on, not after what happened last time. He'd find another way, a weakness, a vulnerability. She just didn't know what it was. Night fell. The cabin was quiet, tense. The children were in the back room huddled together. Emmett stood by the window with his rifle. Clara sat by the fire, Daniel asleep in her arms. He'll come tonight, Emmett said. I can feel it. I know. You should take the children and go, while there's still time. Clara looked at him. We talked about this. I know, but... No buts. She stood and crossed the room to stand beside him. I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not ever. He looked at her for a long moment. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I know. Despite everything, he smiled. The sound came just past midnight. Not hoofbeats this time. Not a knock on the door. Just a soft voice calling from somewhere outside. Mama? Clara's blood went cold. That's Maggie, she whispered. She ran to the back room. The children were there huddled together, but Maggie was gone. Where is she? Clara demanded. Where's your sister? Lizzie's face was white with terror. She said she heard something outside, a kitten crying. She went to look. Clara didn't hear the rest. She was already running for the door. Clara, wait! Emmett grabbed her arm. It's a trap. I don't care, he has my daughter. If you go out there alone, he'll have you too. Clara stopped, her chest heaving, her mind racing. Emmett was right. She knew he was right. But every instinct in her body was screaming to run outside to find her daughter, to protect her child. Mama? Maggie's voice came again, closer this time. Frightened. Mama, help! I'm here, baby! Clara shouted. I'm coming! No, you're not. Silas's voice cut through the darkness. Not unless you want to see what happens when a little girl makes me angry. Clara felt her heart stop. Let her go, she said. This is between you and me. You're right, it is. Silas's voice was calm, almost pleasant. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out that door alone. You're going to come with me, nice and quiet. And in exchange, I'll let your daughter go. Don't do it, Clara, Emmett said. If she doesn't, the girl dies. Simple as that. Clara looked at Emmett, at the fear in his eyes, at the love. Then she looked at the door. Promise me, she said to him, her voice barely a whisper. Promise me you'll take care of them. All of them. Clara, don't. Promise me. Emmett's face crumpled. I promise. Clara kissed him once hard and fast. Then she opened the door and stepped outside. Silas stood 20 feet away, one arm wrapped around Maggie's throat. The girl was crying, her small body shaking with fear. There she is, Silas smiled. The woman who ruined my life. Let her go, Clara said. I'm here. I'm coming with you. Just let her go. First tell your boyfriend to put down his gun. Clara looked back at Emmett standing in the doorway with his rifle raised. Do it, she said. Clara. Please, Emmett. For Maggie. Slowly, painfully, Emmett lowered his rifle. Good. Silas pushed Maggie forward. The girl stumbled and fell. Now, Mrs. Whitmore, let's go. Clara started walking toward him. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. She could hear Maggie crying behind her. Could hear Emmett's ragged breathing. could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. 4 steps. 5. Silas reached out and grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Finally," he breathed. "You're mine." Clara looked into his eyes, and then she did something she'd never done before. She fought back. Her knee came up hard, connecting with Silas's groin. He doubled over with a grunt of pain, his grip loosening. Clara tore free and ran. "Emmett!" she screamed. The rifle shot split the night. Silas jerked, stumbled, fell, and didn't get up. Clara stopped running, turned, saw Silas lying in the snow, a dark stain spreading beneath him. Saw Emmett rifle still raised, his face carved from stone. Saw Maggie running toward her crying. Clara caught her daughter and held her tight. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay. You're safe now. You're safe." Emmett walked toward them, his footsteps slow and heavy. He looked at Silas's body, then at Clara. "It's over," he said. "For real this time." Clara nodded, unable to speak. He pulled her into his arms. Maggie squeezed between them. Behind them, the other children spilled out of the cabin, running toward their mother, toward safety, toward the man who had become their father in every way that mattered. Tommy reached them first, throwing his arms around Clara's waist. Then Lizzie. Sam rose. Even Will came, pressing himself against Emmett's leg and holding on tight. They stood there in the cold, 7 children and 2 adults. A family forged in fire and fear and love. And for the first time in a very long time, Clara believed that everything was going to be okay. The sun rose an hour later. Clara sat on the porch, Daniel in her arms, watching the light spill across the valley. The sheriff and his men had come and gone, taking Silas's body with them. The children were asleep inside, exhausted from the night's terror. Emmett sat beside her, his hand in hers. "You saved us," Clara said quietly. "You saved yourself." Emmett squeezed her fingers. "I just finished the job." "Emmett." "Yeah." She turned to look at him. "Ask me again." He smiled, slow and warm. "Stay," he said. "Please stay." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Forever." The weeks that followed were the quietest Clara had ever known. Not silent. The cabin was never silent anymore, not with 7 children running through it every hour of the day. But quiet in a different way. Peaceful. Like a storm that had finally passed, leaving nothing but clear sky behind. Silas Brandt was buried in an unmarked grave outside of town. Nobody came to mourn him. Nobody said his name. It was as if he had never existed at all. Clara wished she could forget that easily. She still woke in the night sometimes, her heart pounding, her hands reaching for children who were safely asleep beside her. She still flinched at loud noises, still caught herself looking over her shoulder when she walked to the well. The fear had become part of her, woven into her bones like thread into cloth. But it was fading. Day by day, moment by moment, it was fading. Emmett helped. He always did. He didn't push her to talk about what had happened, didn't force her to relive the terror of that night. He just stayed, steady and sure like a mountain she could lean against when her legs got tired. "You're thinking too hard again," he said one morning, finding her at the window. Clara turned. "How do you always know?" "You get this little line between your eyebrows." He reached up and smoothed it with his thumb. "Right here." She caught his hand and held it against her cheek. "I keep waiting for something bad to happen." "I know." "Does it ever stop, the waiting?" Emmett was quiet for a moment. "Eventually. Not all at once. Just little pieces at a time, until one day you realize you forgot to be afraid." Clara closed her eyes. "Promise." "Promise." She believed him. The town began to change. It started small. A nod from the blacksmith when Clara walked past. A wave from the woman at the dry goods store. Little acknowledgments barely visible, but Clara noticed every one. Then Mrs. Henderson, the preacher's wife, stopped Clara outside the church. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Clara tensed, waiting for the judgment, the whispered condemnation. But Mrs. Henderson just looked at her with soft eyes. "I owe you an apology," she said. "We all do. The way we treated you, the things we said." She shook her head. "We were wrong. And I'm sorry." Clara didn't know what to say. What Silas did, what he tried to do. Mrs. Henderson's voice dropped. "We should have seen it. Should have stopped it years ago. Instead, we looked the other way and let him hurt people." She reached out and took Clara's hand. "You were brave enough to stand up to him when the rest of us were too scared to try. That means something." Clara's throat was tight. "Thank you," she managed. Mrs. Henderson squeezed her hand, then turned and walked away. Clara stood there for a long moment processing what had just happened. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. The children thrived. Tommy grew taller every day, his shoulders broadening, his voice deepening. He still practiced with the rifle every morning, but there was something different in his eyes now. Not fear, not anger, just determination. "Emmett says I'm good enough to hunt," he told Clara one evening, pride shining on his face. "Really hunt. Deer maybe. Or elk." Clara felt a pang in her chest. Her little boy becoming a man. "Just be careful," she said. "I will, Mama." He paused. "Emmett says careful ain't the same as scared. He says being careful means you respect the danger, but you don't let it stop you." Clara smiled. "Emmett's pretty smart." "Yeah." Tommy looked toward the barn where Emmett was working. "He is." Lizzie had found a new passion. Doc Foster had started teaching her about medicine, letting her help with simple tasks around the clinic. The girl absorbed knowledge like a sponge, asking questions faster than anyone could answer them. "She's got a gift," Doc Foster told Clara. "A real healer's instinct. If she wants to, she could be a doctor someday." Clara looked at her daughter carefully, wrapping a bandage around a patient's arm, her small face serious with concentration. "She can be anything she wants," Clara said. Anything at all. Sam and Maggie had become inseparable from the ranch. They spent hours with the horses learning to ride, learning to care for the animals. Emmett had given them each a foal to raise, and they treated the creatures like precious treasures. Rose had started talking more, her baby words turning into sentences, then into stories. She followed Clara everywhere, chattering about everything she saw, everything she thought, everything she dreamed. And Will. Will had finally come back to life. It happened slowly, word by word, day by day. First a whisper here, a question there. Then sentences. Then conversations. He still didn't talk much, not like the other children, but when he spoke, everyone listened. His first full conversation was with Emmett. Clara had been in the kitchen when she heard them on the porch. She moved to the window, watching through the glass. Will sat beside Emmett on the steps, his small body pressed close to the big man's side. Emmett was whittling something, his knife, moving in slow, careful strokes. "What are you making?" Will asked. "A horse. For your mama." Will watched the knife for a moment. "Why?" "Because she likes horses. And because making things helps me think." "What are you thinking about?" Emmett stopped whittling and looked at the boy. "About how lucky I am," he said. "About how a few months ago I was alone in this cabin with nothing but ghosts and regrets. And now I've got you. All of you." Will was quiet for a long moment. "Do you love my mama?" Clara held her breath. "Yes," Emmett said. "I do." "Are you going to marry her?" Emmett smiled. "If she'll have me." "She will." Will's voice was certain. "She loves you too. I can tell." "How can you tell?" "Because she smiles different when you're around. Like she forgot how to be sad." Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Emmett reached out and pulled the boy close. "You're pretty smart for a little guy," he said. "I know." They sat there together, man and boy, watching the sunset. And Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was home. Martha came to dinner. It was the first time she'd set foot in the cabin since Clara arrived, and the tension was palpable. The children watched with wide eyes as Martha settled into her chair, her back straight, her face unreadable. "This is good," Martha said, taking a bite of the stew Clara had made. "Better than Emmett's." "That's not saying much," Emmett replied. "I can barely boil water." "True." Clara watched the exchange, holding her breath. Martha's approval meant everything to Emmett, even if he wouldn't admit it. If she couldn't accept, Clara couldn't accept the children. "The girl?" Martha said suddenly. "Lizzie? Doc Foster says she's got talent." Clara nodded carefully. "She loves learning about medicine. Doc Foster's getting old. She'll need someone to take over the clinic eventually." Martha looked at Clara. "Would you let her? Let Lizzie become a doctor?" "I'd let her become anything she wanted." Martha studied her for a long moment. "Good," she said finally. "Too many women in this world get told what they can't do. It's nice to see one who's being told what she can." Clara felt something ease in her chest. "Thank you." Martha waved a hand. "Don't thank me. Just keep making stew like this, and we'll call it even." After dinner, Martha pulled Clara aside. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Clara's heart clenched. "What?" "My brother." Martha glanced toward the other room where Emmett was playing with the children. "After Rebecca died, I thought I'd lost him. Not to death, but to something worse. He just disappeared. Stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring about anything. I used to come by every week just to make sure he was still breathing." Clara nodded. She'd seen the shadows of that darkness in Emmett's eyes. "Then you came along." Martha's voice was grudging, but honest. "And suddenly he was eating again, sleeping again, laughing again." She shook her head. "I didn't want to admit it, but you brought him back to life." "Martha." "I'm not good at this." Martha interrupted. "I don't know how to say thank you. Don't know how to apologize for the way I treated you. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what you've done for him." She paused. "And I'm grateful." Clara reached out and took Martha's hand. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me." Martha nodded once, sharp and quick. "Don't make me regret it." Then she turned and walked back to the dinner table. Clara watched her go, her heart full. The proposal came on a Sunday. Clara was hanging laundry when Emmett approached, his hands in his pockets, his face unusually nervous. "Got a minute?" She set down the shirt she was holding. "Of course." Emmett took a deep breath. "I ain't good with words," he said. "You know that. I'm better with my hands, better with actions. But there's something I need to say, and I've been practicing it in my head for weeks, so just bear with me." Clara's heart started pounding. "When Rebecca died, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd just exist until I didn't anymore, taking up space, using up air. I didn't see the point in anything." He paused. "Then I found you. Half-frozen, barely breathing, with 7 children who needed a miracle. And something in me woke up. Something I thought was dead." Clara felt tears building behind her eyes. "You gave me a reason to live again." Emmett continued. "You and those kids. You filled this cabin with noise and laughter and chaos, and I realized that's what I'd been missing all along. Not silence, not peace, but life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a ring, simple gold worn with age. "This was my mother's," he said. "She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to someone who deserved it." He held it out to Clara, his hand trembling slightly. "I think she would have liked you." Clara couldn't speak. "I know I ain't much," Emmett said. "I'm old and broken, and I come with more ghosts than a cemetery. But I love you, Clara Whitmore. I love your children. I love this crazy, beautiful life we've built together." He looked into her eyes. "Will you marry me?" Clara stared at the ring, at his face, at the hope and fear warring in his eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Emmett blinked. Yes. Yes. She laughed through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I love you too. Behind them, a cheer erupted. Clara turned to find all 7 children pressed against the window, their faces split with grins. He did it, Tommy shouted. He actually did it. I told you she'd say yes, Lizzie added. Even Will was smiling, his small face bright with joy. Clara laughed, wiping tears from her cheeks. You knew about this? We helped him practice, Sam admitted. He was really nervous. Emmett groaned. You weren't supposed to tell her that. It's true, though. Clara looked at her family, all 9 of them laughing and teasing and loving each other. Her heart felt like it might burst. Get out here, she said. All of you. They tumbled out of the cabin and into her arms. Emmett wrapped himself around all of them, his big arms pulling them close. For a moment, everything was perfect. The wedding was simple. They held it at the cabin under the cottonwood tree, where Rebecca and Hannah were buried. Clara had offered to choose somewhere else, somewhere that didn't carry so much grief. But Emmett had shaken his head. They'd want to be there, he said. They'd want to see me happy again. So they stood under the tree, surrounded by family and friends. Pastor Owens, who had replaced the corrupt preacher, performed the ceremony. Martha stood as witness, her face stern but her eyes soft. Doc Foster sat in the front row, dabbing at her cheeks with a handkerchief. And the children. All 7 of them dressed in their best clothes, watching with shining eyes as their mother married the man who had saved them all. Tommy stood beside Emmett as best man, his chin high, his shoulders straight. Lizzie held the flowers, her fingers trembling with excitement. Sam and Maggie fidgeted, but stayed quiet. Rose kept asking when she could throw petals. Daniel slept peacefully in Martha's arms. And Will. Will stood beside Clara, holding her hand. Do you, Emmett James Holloway, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Pastor Owens asked. I do. Emmett said, his voice steady. And do you, Clara Ann Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Emmett, at his scarred hands and tired eyes and fierce protective heart. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. Pastor Owens smiled. You may kiss the bride. Emmett pulled her close and kissed her gentle and sure. The children erupted in cheers. Rose finally got to throw her petals. Tommy wiped his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Even Martha smiled. Clara held on to her husband and let the joy wash over her. She was home. The months passed. Spring melted into summer. Summer faded into fall. The ranch grew busier, fuller, louder. Emmett expanded the cabin, adding 2 new rooms for the children. Clara planted a garden behind the house, teaching the younger kids how to grow vegetables. Tommy started working with Frank, Martha's husband, learning the cattle trade. The town had changed too. With Silas gone, the corruption slowly drained away. New businesses opened. New families moved in. The whispers about Clara faded, replaced by smiles and waves and invitations to dinner. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was one of them. One evening, as Clara sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emmett joined her. He settled into the chair beside her and took her hand. You're doing that thing again, he said. What thing? That thinking thing, with the line between your eyebrows. Clara smiled. Old habit. What are you thinking about? She was quiet for a moment. About how different everything is, she said finally. A year ago, I was walking through a blizzard with 7 starving children, certain we were all going to die. And now... She gestured at the cabin behind them, at the sound of children laughing inside. Now I have everything I ever wanted. Emmett squeezed her hand. You deserve it, he said. Every bit of it. So do you. He shook his head. I didn't do anything. You opened your door. Clara turned to look at him. You saw a woman and 7 children freezing in the snow, and you didn't walk away. You didn't pretend you didn't see. You chose to help even though it cost you everything. It didn't cost me anything. It almost cost you your life, more than once. Emmett was quiet for a moment. Worth it, he said finally. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. Yeah, it was. The door burst open and Tommy appeared, his face flushed with excitement. Mama Emmett will said something. Clara straightened. What? He called Emmett Pa. Clara's heart stopped. She looked at Emmett, saw the shock on his face, the emotion he was trying to hide. He did. Emmett's voice was rough. He did. Tommy was grinning. We were in the barn, and I asked him to hand me the brush, and he said, Pa already has it. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Emmett stood and walked into the cabin, his stride quick. Clara followed, her heart pounding. She found him in the children's room, kneeling beside Will's bed. The boy was sitting up, his small face uncertain. Will? Emmett's voice was barely a whisper. Tommy said you called me something. Will nodded, his eyes wide. What did you call me? Will was quiet for a long moment. Then in a voice soft as a prayer he said it. Pa. Emmett made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled the boy into his arms and held him tight. Yeah, he said. Yeah, that's right. I'm your pa. Clara watched them, her heart so full it hurt. One by one the other children gathered around. Tommy put his hand on Emmett's shoulder. Lizzie wrapped her arms around Will. Sam and Maggie squeezed in wherever they could fit. Rose climbed into Clara's lap. Daniel gurgled happily in his cradle. They stayed there for a long time, tangled together in a pile of arms and legs and love. A family, not by blood, not by law, but by choice. And that Clara realized was the strongest bond of all. The first anniversary of their wedding came and went. Clara woke that morning to find Emmett already up, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in his hands. She watched him for a moment, this man who had changed her life. What are you thinking about? She asked. He turned and smiled. About how lucky I am. Clara rose and crossed the room to stand beside him. I'm the lucky one, she said. You saved my life, saved my children's lives, gave us a home when we had nothing. You saved me right back. Emmett set down his coffee and took her hands. I was dead before you came, Clara, walking around breathing but dead inside. You brought me back to life. She leaned into him, feeling his warmth, his strength. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. The door creaked open, and Will appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mama, Pa, why are you awake? Emmett bent down and scooped the boy into his arms. Just watching the sunrise, he said. Want to watch with us? Will nodded and settled against Emmett's chest. One by one, the other children woke and joined them. Tommy leaned against the doorframe, trying to look too old for this kind of thing, but watching anyway. Lizzie pulled Rose onto her hip. Sam and Maggie squeezed between Clara and Emmett. Daniel fussed until Clara picked him up. They stood there together, 9 people who had become a family through hardship and hope, watching the sun rise over the valley. Clara thought about everything they'd been through. The cold, the hunger, the fear, the long walk through the snow, certain they were going to die. Finding Emmett, finding safety, finding home. She thought about Silas and the terror he'd brought, about the town that had judged her, then accepted her, about Martha, who had learned to love her, about Doc Foster, who had given Lizzie a dream. She thought about Rebecca and Hannah buried under the cottonwood tree, about the family Emmett had lost and the family he'd found. She thought about second chances, about how sometimes the worst moments of your life lead to the best, about how love could grow in the strangest places between the most unlikely people, about how home wasn't a building or a town or a piece of land, It was the people who stood beside you when everything fell apart. It was choosing to stay even when leaving would be easier. It was saying yes when you had every reason to say no. Clara looked at her husband, at her children, at the life they'd built together, and she understood finally what it meant to be whole. "What are you thinking about, Mama?" Lizzie asked. Clara smiled. "About how this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Emmett's arm tightened around her. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." The sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the valley. The children chattered and laughed and bickered and loved the way children always do. Emmett held Clara close, solid and warm and real. She had come to this place with nothing but 7 hungry children and a desperate prayer. She had found a home, a husband, a family. She had found herself. And standing there surrounded by everyone she loved, Clara Holloway knew one thing with absolute certainty. Some storms don't destroy you. They deliver you exactly where you were always meant to be.